Well, welcome to another episode of Chess Not Checkers. I am Keith Riddle here with my co-host Jordan Tampien, as always, and today's guest is Bill Kalivas. Bill, thanks for coming with us. You are with Launchpad INW.
I am.
Correct?
Yeah.
Local Spokane native.
Local native. Yeah.
Been here your whole life?
No, I lived in Greece for 3 years. I was in the Air Force, and father's side of the family is from Greece.
Okay.
So I think that had something to do with it, with my last name. And then
you think they sent you there because of your last name?
Oh yeah, yeah. There were
Really?
several Greek Americans there on base because in the Air Force back then in the 80s, at that particular base right outside of Athens, they didn't have base housing, so you had to live in the community. So there were a lot of people with Greek American names that were there that could speak a little bit of the language. I could speak a little bit just to kind of make my way, and so that was part of it. I lived there for 3 years. It was awesome. It was a lot of fun.
Beautiful. We're at in
right outside of Athens, and I played a lot of sports growing up. So I played football, and they actually every base.
Are we talking about football? Or are we talking about
American football?
Okay.
Yeah. And so it was a lot of ex-college players, and every base had a team, and it was a lot of ex-college players, and we got to play in Spain, Italy, Germany.
Wow. So you got to play. You didn't just like have base games against each other.
No, it was legit. I mean,
wow.
You had to try out. There was some real players. Our quarterback was from Southern University. The other receiver was from Arkansas. Running back played at Kentucky.
Okay, this is probably like a rabbit trail, but like I watched football in college, and there's Air Force has a team.
So it's different. That's the academy.
Oh, okay.
This was a base team, but we all, it was official football, and we played. There was a lot of ex-college guys that dropped out for whatever reason. I dropped out of college as well, but I wasn't playing football. But I played enough to where I made the team and played. Before I was the Julian Edelman. Short white dude, running around as a flanker, and had a blast, man. It was a lot of fun.
That sounds like. So 3 years in the Air Force.
3 years in Greece, and then a year in Northern California at a base called Beale Air Force Base. So those two bases were intel bases, so linguists.
Yeah.
So I was in logistics. So I was the guy ordering all the supply stuff for communications equipment, healthcare stuff, but mostly to keep the flyers up and going and with listening devices. So Arabic, Russian, all that kind of stuff. And then I got stationed at an intel base in Northern California for a year and wanted to get back to Spokane, wanted to get back in the private sector.
Nice.
Yeah. What did you transition to in the private sector from that?
Yeah, I got out in 87, and I came a month early and just put my resume out everywhere. I had taken some college in the military, which was a phenomenal move for me. And I got a job at Deaconess Medical Center as a buyer's assistant, making $8.50 an hour, and going to night school. And I was married and had 2 kids. Making $8 an hour was tough.
That's tough.
Yeah. But
I always wonder that though when people tell me an era because I'm not necessarily familiar with the era. So $8.50 an hour in 1988.
88. Yeah.
That was not great money.
It wasn't great, but it was enough where I could get an apartment. My ex-wife
you
didn't
could live
work.
off it with a family.
She didn't work at first, and then she got a job at a daycare, so we could take our kids there.
Yeah.
But I was going to night school so I could make a little extra money with Pell Grants, and I was also, I wanted to finish school. I was a little hungry, but it was my step towards the tech industry. I was a buyer, and I went to the IT department. I said, "Teach me about technology. I want to be your buyer." And they taught me and mentored me, and I became the buyer for the tech department for 2 years.
Oh, wow. Of the hospital?
Of all the hospitals. So back then it was Empire Health Services.
What kind of tech are we talking about?
All the systems.
Like X-ray machines and stuff, or like software?
Everything.
Like everything.
So medical equipment, very technical even back then. But back then they were also starting to implement CRMs, so databases. They were also beginning to implement it was more of the mini mainframes. So they were called CRTs. They were computer remote terminals that would sit on people's desks. They were just starting to roll that stuff out. So it was the perfect timing. And I also learned spreadsheets. So they taught me to use spreadsheets to track all of the capital equipment, all the capital expenditures.
Yeah.
So I learned a ton. Yeah. I learned about tech, but also some of the buying, philosophies as well.
What kind of spurred that interest in the technology? Just kind of seeing it play out, or it seems like a pretty niche market coming from Air Force football to
football wasn't my job.
It was
I
picture that as your job now.
Yeah. Well, my ex-wife kind of thought it was for a while.
Yeah.
You're not far from that. No, I had a really good job. It was 7:30, 4:30 office, job. I learned a lot, but I always had an interest in tech, but I wasn't a nerd.
Yeah.
And in high school, we had our first, Apple and all the guys that were doing, kind of the calculus classes. They were always into it, and I thought that even back then, probably I graduated in '82 from East Valley, and I always thought, and I told my friends, someday I'm going to sell computers.
Yeah.
Because this is going to be big someday. And that's what I ended up doing later after my stint at the hospital. But yeah, it was just, I don't know what it was about technology. I was fascinated with the ability to take a business problem and utilize technology. When I started in the Air Force,
Are you
we had
geeking out on all the AI stuff now? Or is that ship sailed? Are you like, I'm over it?
I was at Google when OpenAI came out with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
It made my life hell.
Really?
Yeah.
When was this?
Well, so I was at Google. I just retired from Google and tech sales, but I was at Google from 2020 until 2 months ago.
Okay.
So I was there for 5 years.
So this is very recent, because I was like, ChatGPT isn't that old, right?
Yeah, ChatGPT came out in my third year. I think it was 2023. And we had been sitting on this amazing technology at Google, and we were aware of it, but we weren't actively selling it. It was more of the safe, ethical stance at Google. But Google was really the pioneer for large language models, the transformer. A lot of the basic fundamental elements of AI came from Google, and DeepMind is their research arm. And they sat on it for a long time. And
just
OpenAI,
the fear that would get into the wrong hands, or somebody would use it like maliciously.
Yeah, I think there was more fear of the ethical side of it, that they wanted to be very cautious, but they were ready to roll it out from a commercial implementation standpoint. We were already working on some things that were part of in the toolkit of things I could sell at Google. But more than anything, Sam Altman and OpenAI just really had this commercialization idea to get it in the hands of people through a ChatGPT for more of the retail side, which means, hey, help me write this email. So there's two types, right? There's the kind that businesses use for more complex, detailed analysis of data, but then there's also the fun stuff, right? The generative AI stuff.
Yeah.
Like create this image and do this and make this fun thing. So yeah, I mean, in the beginning, Google was really concerned, but now they're going full steam ahead. Really put a ton of investment into
it. Backtracking though, you said it made your life hell. What was up with that?
Yeah, well, we had to do a massive learning of all things AI. We had to test every quarter. You had to literally take a test to get out of the quarter. You had to pass. You could only miss 2 out of 20 questions. And it was good because we needed to learn. And that also helped as we were talking to customers. But we were just sort of taking over for about 6 to 8 months of all things AI. And it really meant that everything else kind of was on hold. And so it upended a lot of our learnings and things that we were working on. But in hindsight, it was probably a pretty good idea to give us a kind of a fast track training on AI.
Super fast track. Actually, it's funny as we just talked about it, because I've started implementing it more in the business side of what we're doing, from the emails to just kind of productivity. It's amazing. I could see why they probably had an ethical dilemma initially, though. That makes sense, because you don't know how to roll out. You don't know what piece. So did they ultimately get over that, or they just saw the upside of what it could
rolled
do?
out first.
Yeah, right.
It's over now.
Well,
Is that kind of what it was?
It's kind of a little bit. I mean, I think they did it the right way. I think they're competing now in a pretty strong way. I'm a very strong advocate for Google. The culture was amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a goal of mine to work for a company like that. I had worked for some of the larger tech firms in the world, and this was just really one of those cultures that you would love to work for. They treated people
what made
very
it so
fairly.
good?
They treated people in a way that you felt involved, you felt appreciated. Here's an example. So about 2 years into it, I was stuck at home. I didn't even want to go back into cloud. I had been selling networking for 20 years, but always lived in Spokane, other than 5 years in Silicon Valley. So your first question was always in Spokane. So 4 years in the Air Force and 5 years in Silicon Valley from 94 to 99. And so that was in the heyday of the internet, right?
I was going to say, that might be some fun years.
It was a blast.
Yeah.
It was a blast.
Yeah.
I had gone through a divorce, and my ex-wife and the kids moved to Orlando. So I would go to Orlando or bring them up here. And then I got promoted with a company I was working for in tech down to the Bay Area. And that was just a massive lesson of some of the best salespeople on the planet were mentors for me. And it was rough the first couple of years. Like, you had to know your stuff, and it was complex. And there was also a lot of partying.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
A lot of partying. And I was kind of done partying at that point. I was in my like early 30s. I was like, I need to get to work.
Yeah.
And it was a little weird culturally with the first company I worked for, but it was still a really good lesson. And I ended up leaving, going to a different company and started working more with Cisco solutions. And then when I moved back here in 99, my ex-wife and my kids came with me because we wanted to be in Spokane because it's a better environment for kids.
Yeah.
And that's what brought me back, is family, friendships. They were just kind of really struggling in Orlando. I moved them to California, and then we moved back here to be closer to family.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. What are some of those takeaways you take from a Google? Like they just do it so well. Like as we scaled, we ran into those roadblocks of scaling culture, which was really hard, or scaling into your new systems. What are some things that like a normal business could apply that Google introduced or at least showed you on your side of it?
Yeah. The main thing really was my boss came to Spokane a couple times. The first 2 years we were in lockdown.
Oh yeah.
And that was the main reason I went to Google, was I knew the cloud was going to explode with all the digital technology required based on everyone
So is this
being
when they
home.
were rolling out like Google Drive real hard and like pushing that direction, or is this like, you have a better frame of reference than I do of this? 'Cause I just think about like when I started using stuff and it became
Google
more
Drive
mainstream.
had been out for a while, but more of the universities and kids in school, teachers, things like that, a lot of people were using that. And Amazon and Microsoft had a huge advantage because they started selling cloud services probably 10, 15 years ahead of Google Cloud. So Google Cloud was in third place. So when the recruiter called me, I was like, no, thanks. And then the pandemic hit. We were all working from home. I called a buddy of mine in tech in Seattle, super plugged in, and he said, jump, because they're investing millions into the infrastructure, into people that live in the region that have relationships. And that was me.
Okay.
I had been working for another tech company for 7 years called Aruba, and we got acquired by HPE. But I managed 3 states for 7 years: Eastern Washington, northern, most of Idaho and Montana, part of Alaska at times. So, and they were like, this guy has relationships. That's the main reason they contacted me. And then I called the recruiter back after talking to my buddy in Seattle, and he said, jump. This could be really lucrative and also a good company. And my manager from Google came over a couple times, and about a year and a half into it, he said, Spokane is a much slower, it's not really a tech hub like Seattle or Portland or Boise. Why don't you bring Launchpad back as your 20% passion project? So this is to answer your question.
Yeah.
Google invests in people because their passion sometimes will take their attention away, right?
Oh, nice.
So if you think about all these side hustles that people have, it takes their attention away. So Google, for many, many years, would let engineers work on their passion project at work and give you 20% of your time. In some of their buildings, which are incredible, they're in amazing locations, free food, maker spaces, which means they have a space for you to actually, with all the toys, to actually make products, a band room, a massage room, a nap room. They have these amazing spaces where they want you to stay and be your full self. But they give you 20% of your time. They gave me 20% of my time to bring Launchpad back for the community.
That's cool.
And what does that tell you? As an employee, you're like, I'm really respectful and appreciative of that. And you gain respect, and you're, that's the loyalty you want from your employees, to say, we're going to give you your time, and we respect you enough to know that you can manage your time and still do those things you need to do to get your job done.
So talk to me about Launchpad, because I think that's how I originally met you.
Yeah.
Way back in the day. What is Launchpad? What was Launchpad? What is Launchpad today? Like, how did that even come about initially? And then obviously you said you brought it back, so it died for a while.
Yeah. It just
But
went
how
away.
did Launchpad ever originate, and what is it, just for the consumers or the listeners that don't know?
Yeah. So in 99, I was hanging out, working for Cisco Systems, managing all new sales for technology.
This is when you were doing a lot of drugs, right?
That time, yes.
You're gonna edit that. Yeah.
So it's 99. I was
Yeah,
working for that tech
sure.
company.
Yeah,
You know, we're doing a lot of drugs.
Yeah.
No.
Making cool stuff.
Yeah, still playing football.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, 99, I get back, I go to work for Cisco, and which is cool because that was right around the time everyone thought they needed a website, but they had no idea why. And there was no commerce because there was no PayPal. There wasn't a safe way to buy stuff. And so Amazon hadn't really kicked into high gear yet, right? But people were like, I need a website. Well, to do that, you needed a router, you needed a firewall. So all the technology that I sold with Cisco. But I started throughout the whole region, Tri-Cities, Spokane, North Idaho, there's all these entrepreneurs with tech companies. Yeah. And I thought, there's a hidden innovation economy here. It's just spread out and nobody's really talking about it. And so one of my friends, Rob Brewster, and I, and about 6 or 7 of us would meet at the Rocket Bakery or the Rocket Coffee Place over on Main, next to Zola. That used to be a Rocket owned by Jeff Postaway,
that's right.
a guy I grew up with. So we moved to East Valley when I was 11 from Hilliard. And I grew up with Dan Spalding. Yeah. He owned the building. Jeff Postaway had the Rocket. Jess Walter, the author, he went to East Valley. And then we would all kind of hang out there. And a few other people like Rob Brewster, we kind of all just started hanging out, just BSing. And one day Rob was telling us he bought the Holly Mason. Yeah. Lewis and Clark had the lease while they were renovating, but they were going to move out. And he was struggling to find tenants. And I said, you know, back when I was in the Bay Area, VCs would hold these really cool parties for entrepreneurs, and they would give away, you know, free booze. It'd be fun, energetic with music, and it was just high dynamic fun. And I said, why don't we have a fun tech party? And I thought, so one of my friends, I had a brainstorm. He said, let's call it Launchpad. So I invited entrepreneurs, about 20, to host a booth. I had music there. We had food. I invited some speakers from Cisco. We didn't have social media. And I went to Gage Stromberg, who started Coeur d'Alene Brewing back then. They were in the steam plant. And he said, I'll give you guys free beer if you give away my plastic cups that have my logo and my URL for my website on there. And I was like, done. Yeah. Free beer, music, fun, all that. We thought we'd get 100 to 150 people. We had over 700 people show up, plus all 3 TV stations.
Nice. Really?
And Stacey Coles came. He wrote an op-ed about it the next day, and he said, there's something going on here. We had no idea there were all these entrepreneurs and tech companies in the region. Did you run out of beer? I don't know. That's the right question.
Key takeaway.
Yeah. That's a good question. So we knew we were onto something, and I was still working for Cisco, and Rob was just elated. He was doing tours up and down the building, and the Holly's a beautiful building. We ended up being in there a couple years later, and then from that, I spoke at a couple of events because I had moved back from Silicon Valley. I did this event, and someone from Avista contacted me and said, we're putting a committee together to figure out how we grow the tech economy in the region. And that's when I caught the bug of helping the local economy become more of a tech-based economy and more about innovation. So I was on this committee, flew to Olympia with the CEO of Itron, Avista, and one of the county commissioners and me to pitch starting this new organization. And we ended up getting $1.5 million to start an organization. And I went to work for that organization to help build.
Was that Launchpad?
No, it was called InTech.
Oh, okay.
InTech, yeah. But we did the Launchpad event as part of that 501c3.
Gotcha.
So I just kept doing it every year under the whatever organization. So I left Cisco. It was after 9/11, after the dot-com burst, I left. And I really got interested in this public sector life. And I was on every board around town. And I was kind of this 30-something, thought he knew everything, a little bit of an ego. And here I am with some of the largest, I was on the DSP board for 10 years. And I got to meet a lot of the developers, and I was on the GSI board, workforce development. And I probably, looking back on that, I was a little cocky in that I thought, here are all these people that have built companies, had a lot of money. And here I am telling everybody what we need to do to build a tech-based economy. And just because I had an event that I did, right?
Well, I had a good turnout though.
Yeah.
That's a good plus.
And I was hanging out with Rob and like 3 or 4 other people that, there was a local newspaper called The Local Planet back then.
Oh yeah,
used to
I do remember that actually.
And they put us on the cover the high-tech hotshots or something like that. And I'm like, that went straight to my head.
Oh, yeah.
Like, oh man,
Well,
we
such a
can.
cool one.
Yeah, it was humbling. It was humbling later, but yeah.
Later.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's so interesting to hear these stories and to see where things were and kind of remember. I feel like I'm a Spokane native, but being born here, like you hear these names and you see these things, but I wasn't in the know of what was going on. And you said it was pre-social media too, right?
Yeah,
So
Yeah,
it
it's
wasn't
hard
really,
to
it was
know,
a lot
right?
of kind of
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
I don't want to say good old boys club, but just kind of things were happening around and you kind of either knew or you didn't, but that was like,
There actually was a good old boys club. I'm not
oh
gonna
yeah,
lie.
there totally is.
yeah.
It probably still is. Yeah.
I'm
I
sure.
think so.
Yeah.
What I love about now is there's so many women that are running the economic
Yeah.
development organizations, and there is much more diversity of thought that's happening, and I'm really excited about what's going on now. But I mean, I worked in the public sector until 2006, so I was with that organization. We ruffled a lot of feathers. We were like really kind of pushing back on what a lot of the organizations, the good old boys club, would say, well, we can't change. This is how we've always done things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here we are saying, well, wait a minute. If you really want to grow jobs and grow a robust economy, these are some, and we had a report written by a guy named Nathan Brown. He's now with Treasury 4, Steve Ballmer's company.
Oh, yeah.
And we commissioned him to write a study called Developing an Innovation Economy for Spokane, the Inland Northwest.
Yeah.
Everybody shut it down, and we lost our funding.
Really?
Yeah.
What, did
So
it
that
call-
was
did it
that the
call out?
humbling moment?
What's that?
Was that the humbling moment?
No,
for
that
everything?
came later. But that was, you really started to understand, you got to be careful which institutions you start to talk about or attack. And I learned some lessons there. There's some very powerful, people that I think that was the wrong approach for me.
Yeah.
That's what I learned is you don't just start criticizing without, building relationships and understanding people. And I think that was a life lesson for me that I learned. But they ended up splitting the organization into two organizations, two separate. One was called Connect Northwest,
Yep.
which was the model from San Diego that
Yep.
they put me in charge. So the board consists of people like John Stone.
Yeah.
He became a personal friend and mentor. Roger Woodworth from Avista, Kate McCaslin from the county. So these are all people I got to know, and they were like, we want you to build an organization that helps entrepreneurs get access to mentoring and capital.
Uh-huh.
And we went to San Diego, and they mentored me.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what was the humbling moment?
So after Connect Northwest, we started that organization. I was the CEO founder for 3 years. We had funding, mentoring, all that. I went back to the private sector, and there was a Silicon Valley company selling high-speed networking equipment for all the companies like Yahoo, Microsoft, Amazon, all their data centers. And one of the guys that I worked with in Silicon Valley years before contacted me and said, we need a regional director for the Northwest. So I went to work for them for almost 3 years and flying over to Seattle, Portland,
Yeah.
and living in Spokane. Great job. Really good job because of the complexity of data centers back then. They were the only high-speed, high-density networking platform.
Oh, wow.
That was until Cisco and Juniper started acquiring. But that was a great job. And I started really liking my job. And I was sharing an office with Alan Battle, who I think you guys know.
Yeah.
And we were in Steve Salvatore's
Yeah.
entrepreneur building. And I started to notice social media, Facebook, LinkedIn. And I thought,
MySpace, man.
MySpace was huge.
MySpace was huge.
Yeah.
People don't
Come
know.
on, Tom.
And I went to Alan one day and I said, I think we need a local professional networking site that helps people build connections in their industry. Because my stepfather was a real estate broker, and he had connections with real estate attorneys,
Oh, yeah.
mortgage folks, all the title insurance companies. He played golf with them. He was a natural. I said, that's how I sell in tech. So when my secret sauce was find the technical salespeople that already have relationships that are selling non-competing products.
Yeah.
And I made them my friends. And we would legitimately build relationships. And that's how I gained access into some of these accounts that I had never sold to. And it worked. And I said, I want to teach other people how to do that. So we created Launchpad, the second iteration, because it had gone away in 2006. We created Launchpad in the Northwest that was a professional networking site online. And we had about 2,000 members the first year.
Oh, wow.
And then we did offline events. You have to do this.
Yeah.
So that's what Alan and I did for a few years.
I think that's about when our paths crossed for the first time, probably.
Yeah.
It was about that. I think it's all coming back to me now.
Yeah,
It's all
it was
coming back to me.
fuzzy
I was like,
before.
oh, yeah.
And that
okay.
was, I mean, it was a lot of fun. And we moved to the Holly and started getting bigger. We had probably 6,000 members. We did a paid membership program. We did a ton of events. Josh Wade moved from where he was and moved into the 1889 building and started Nectar.
Yep.
And he contacted me and said, you should move in here and be right next door and do your workshops and stuff. And not only did I do that, I leased the entire top floor and the basement, and we created an underground lounge.
That's cool.
And so we had 3 floors, and I put the whole thing in my name because I thought, I got money in the bank. I've got, I'll do a lease. We're on a rocket ship, so to speak.
Right.
And what could go wrong?
Sure.
Right?
Classic.
This is the humbling moment.
This is right before 2008.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was kind of what I was telling you is about 2 years in, everybody made money but me.
Yeah.
And dwindled my accounts, credit cards maxed out, didn't want to file bankruptcy, just swore I would never do that. Landlords were like, I signed the lease. I wasn't going to just walk away from it. And so we inked a deal that I shut down Launchpad, and my attorney and my accountant took me to lunch one day and said, you got to go get a job, dude. You need to go back to work, and you need to stop. Because I was doubling down on all these different ideas and it just wasn't working. And other building owners were doing co-working and subleasing like we were.
Yeah.
So it was competitive. And the model was fine. It got a little weird, toxic on some of the online stuff, which I didn't love. And then Facebook and LinkedIn just took off. So we were kind of being hit from all sides. So I put it on pause. I went back to work. I ended up going to work for that Aruba HPE company that was so great. I loved working for them. And GSI acquired all of the assets for Launchpad, the co-working, everything. And they started Startup Spokane.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Full circle.
And that organization I started, Connect Northwest, merged into that as well. So those 2 organizations became Startup Spokane.
Yep.
And I went back to the private sector. It was the most humbling part of it was my wife had to go get a job, and she was raising the kids. My ego wouldn't let me stop Launchpad. My ego just took over, even though I was out of money. We were, I got a notice that our house was, almost pretty close to foreclosure.
Yeah.
And I thought, what am I doing? And that's when, the intervention was a good.
Yeah.
But my ego just would not let me lose or fail. And so that's when I just went back to work, and I paid the landlords back in a year, everything. I just worked my butt off and just paid them. I never wanted to file bankruptcy. And nothing against anybody who does, but I just didn't want to have that hanging over me.
Yeah.
But I signed my name.
Yeah.
It was my fault that I stuck my neck out and didn't come through. So I went back into tech and worked my butt off for the last 12 years and just retired from tech sales.
What would happen if there wasn't an intervention? Would you have just kept going?
I want to think not.
Yeah.
I think my wife would have smothered me in my sleep, I think.
At a certain point.
Which you couldn't blame her.
Yeah.
But no, she's amazing. I can't even tell you how patient and how supportive she was through that process, everything I've ever done. And so I kind of woke up to, I've got 2 kids, they're going to be in college. You want to go to college soon, get back to work. And fortunate for me, I have tech in the back in my background, but yeah, it's been a blessing. The last 12, 13 years have been amazing, and I'm very fortunate. But I think, I don't know, I'm a faith-based person. I think something would have intervened. I think that was it. Finally I listened. The number one rule when we coach entrepreneurs, we won't take them if they're not coachable.
Yeah. How do you determine that?
Yeah, so we the model that we brought to Spokane from San Diego, the program's called Springboard.
Yeah.
We've helped about 35 startups in the last 2 years. And you meet with the founder, and between the 3 of us that are the group that run, we really try to ask questions and get to know them just like you would for a client.
Sure.
Just like you would for anybody that might work for you.
Intake consult or something.
Yeah, you just do an assessment, and we try to understand where they're at. They have to be beyond the idea stage. But you also kind of get to know somebody a little bit. You just, you try to assess. This is what I've been doing my whole life, right? Is having a conversation with somebody and asking a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Like you both, I'm very curious. And I try to ask a lot of questions, get to know somebody. And if you feel like they're coachable, we'll try it. We've had to tell people after a few sessions that where we bring people in, it's probably not going to work for you. Because it's hard, man. This is your baby. Like me, I was stubborn. So I
Yeah.
totally get it.
Eat your ego. And we had Tom Simpson on, I think, last week, and we were talking about that. Like,
Yeah.
you know, these guys take a company public, or you're trying to launch a product, and like sometimes the success is actually an alternate product or an alternate thing that they monetize, and it's
Yeah.
like, can you pivot, right? Are you able to pivot away from your passion? But I also like just hearing you talk, man. It just rings so many bells with like one of the things that I've been struggling a lot with lately, or hearing and seeing, is like there's so many stories that are kind of like promoted in society about like when the darkest hour was there, somebody doubled down, didn't give up, and everything worked out, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And but that's
Yeah.
become this kind of like cultural mantra of like when
Yeah.
times get tough, which I agree with,
Yeah.
wholeheartedly to some effect, right?
Sure,
Like, but there's always that like sometimes the strategic thing is to like pull the ripcord,
Yeah.
eject from the plane that's spinning towards Earth at a
Yeah.
rapid pace. But that goes against our ego or
Right.
our kind of natural, but also like all these stories that we're told of like, never give
keep
up,
pushing,
like keep
yeah.
going, So I think
Mhm.
that's, I don't know, there's this
There's a-
balancing act.
There's
of
a
like,
formula.
where is that? Yeah. What does
Yeah.
that look like?
Yeah,
And
it's a really good point. And what I learned from San Diego, which I didn't apply to Launchpad the first go around, was you build an advisory board.
and I've heard Jordan talk about this.
You have to build your advisory board. Without it, that's what I struggled with.
I
was it
need an
was me.
advisory board.
Yeah,
You do.
you
You really
do.
do, though.
And sometimes it's not even people in your own industry.
Mm.
It's someone maybe completely out of
It's
your
almost
industry.
better if they're out of your industry.
Exactly, because they have no bias.
Yeah.
And it's what I have now is I have a really good board, and we're actually growing our board.
Yep.
And I have some really phenomenal people on the team. And for me now, it's not a top-down approach anymore, and it was back then. It's a bottom-up, meaning just like Google, they empowered me. And so right now, the people on the team are empowered. I listen to them. It's more of a conversation versus here's what we're going to do.
Mhm.
And so that's number one. And I also listen to the advisory board, but I also am listening to the audience and the potential members and what are they looking for. So when we decided to bring this back, I went on a tour of meeting with Jack Heath, Marty Dickinson. I met with all the people that were my friends, Scott Wetzel. I
Yeah.
met with all the people I know in the community that I respect. And they all sat down. Every single one of them said, first of all, bring Launchpad back. Great idea. We're in as sponsors. Secondly, I asked them, let me talk to your people, so a few levels below, and find out how we can help you. And I kind of caught them off guard. So I want to help those businesses because if nothing else, I found that Launchpad needs to be a business development partner.
Yeah.
How can we help our partners grow and add new clients?
So you just bringing this full circle. So you did Launchpad and then it kind of went away and then you brought it back.
Right.
So then it went away again. So this is like number 3, right?
Yeah.
Third round. But
Relaunchpad.
with the lessons from number 1 and number
Yeah.
2.
Yeah.
How do you see Launchpad as being different now?
Yeah.
And like overall, like just from the lessons, but also just like direction. Is it still the same direction? I mean, before, like you said, it was kind of a local social media thing. Like, what's the difference now?
Yeah. We are the regional innovation hub, meaning
Okay.
we're basically connected with all these other organizations like Tom's Ignite organization, Spokane Angel Alliance, Evergreen Bioscience. There's Urbanova and Intent are focused on clean energy. So, and then there's Innovation Collective in Coeur d'Alene. There's groups in Tri-Cities. So if you think about it, we have what's called an innovation ecosystem.
Okay.
That's an engine of helping startups grow. So the innovators are the number one thing. I'd probably say mostly we help innovators with their ideas so that they can commercialize them.
Gotcha.
But commercializing them, there's a lot of steps. And so what we found through research is VCs are holding up now on venture capital because the last 10 years were great, but they're starting to, for getting venture capital, but the VCs are starting to find there's not as much return as they thought, right? So it's drying up a little bit and it's harder to get. Well, the reason why is because you could get those $500,000 checks and then some follow on, up to Series A. But the problem was many of them were failing. The first 7 years, over 70% of companies fail, even if they receive VC funding. And so you think, well, wait a minute. That's what the conventional wisdom is. Let's just create a venture fund. Let's create an angel fund and a venture fund. We'll be the next Silicon Valley, right? Well, the problem with that is team culture. The number one reason they fail is people in college are inviting their buddy to come be on the C-suite, and they've never run a startup before. They've never run a company before. And team culture, if it implodes, usually the company implodes.
Yeah.
And so what we do is we're building a regional network. We have over 3,000 people. These are people that have worked in tech, life science, attorneys, marketing. Think of all the different elements we now have in our database. So when we start to mentor, let's say you come to me and say, Bill, I have a company, an AI company that I want to build for trying to calculate traffic flows through the city of Spokane, right? An idea we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And you're beyond idea stage. You've got an MVP, you've got a product, you've got a couple of funders that are giving you seed money, and you're beyond that early stage. And I say, okay, you're coachable. Let's sit down. Our team is going to put you through something called Lean Canvas. By the time you get done with this exercise over 3 months, you'll know your customers. You'll have customers, at least one or two, proving that your product is a pull, not a push, meaning they want it.
Yeah.
So we'll put you through the very basic elements of starting a company and knowing your customers, knowing what your mission is, and knowing how to run the company. Then we're going to introduce you to people that maybe could be on your team or on your board.
Gotcha.
Remember that board part?
Yeah.
That's the hardest part, is building those relationships. So we give you access to all those people. Not to mention, we're a nonprofit now. Those two previous iterations were a for-profit. And I'm retired. So I actually have time to work on this now. And I'm not taking
100% passion.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a whole different model, and we've got, buy-in from businesses that are already sponsors. We're going to have a business element to it, of business development, where we can actually help our partners go out and try to figure out ways to gain new clients. Yeah. So we actually sit down with them and help game plan. And I've got consultants that work with me.
Now, is this just tech innovation type driven stuff?
So it's tech and life sciences our focus, but if you think of innovation, everything can be
innovated. Oh yeah.
Exactly. If you think of good old fashioned, like my oldest son is building, he's focusing on building decks, using the latest technology in materials.
Sure.
And some of the stuff we're going to use for him, there's innovation. You can be innovative. If you're innovative in any kind of industry, come talk to us. Innovation to me is a pretty wide topic. I mean, when you really think about it.
Yeah, that's what we were talking to Tom about. Man, there's like 15 things I want to talk about, but the biggest one was, that's what we were looking at, is like, what can we be innovative in our own thing? And so we're actually building out a property management acquisition platform, so where we can actually scale and grow it using kind of some of these new tech platforms.
Right.
So you're saying, and then, so the bigger one is what does it cost to work with you to do that? I know it's a nonprofit, but still got to pay for it.
Yeah, we have 4 programs. So Springboard is the accelerator for commercializing startups. That's $1,000. And we can also, for folks that just can't afford it, we'll figure out a scholarship.
Cool.
We'll figure out a way they can do it. And then the second one is a program we came up with called Innovator Connect. So there's all these universities. And if you look at other cities where there's a strong innovation hub, like UW and Stanford and Cal and UT and down in Austin, there's always universities involved in spinning out really cool technology, right? And research.
Sure.
And so we've developed a partnership with Eastern's C-STEM program to create a program called Innovator Connect. So at the Catalyst building downtown, next to the Scott Morris Center. So we feature researchers and different people that are domain experts in private industry to talk about a problem. What's the problem? This event we just did was cybersecurity meets AI.
Oh yeah.
So we flew someone in from the Bay Area for Palo Alto Networks, cybersecurity company, talked about all the challenges AI is causing with cybersecurity. And we partnered with Inch 360, which is the cybersecurity group in the region. And so we had all these innovators and researchers and founders and the business community, right? All together. We're averaging 100 to 150 per monthly event. But we are the ones kind of connecting all these people together to spark new partnerships. and help people with their ideas. Because a lot of these founders don't know where to plug in. So we are a regional hub that if you're an innovator or a business professional and you want to find work, or you just want to network, you want to connect, we are the first stop from an innovation standpoint. But if it's something we can't help you with, we will connect you with our partners at Startup Spokane or GSI or some of these other organizations that we're partnered with. The idea is this whole ecosystem needs to be a more smoothly operating engine, right?
Yeah. So backtracking a little bit, you said you have Springboard.
Springboard,
you have
Innovator
Innovator
Connect.
Connect.
And then we do something called Launchpad Co-working Days.
Okay.
So there's several co-working spaces that have opened up.
Yes.
And if you think of COVID,
Sitting in one.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you think of COVID, we all started working from home.
Yeah.
Well, there's a national problem, global, where a lot of people are still isolated, sitting at home. There's a lot of mental health issues. Too many young men are sitting home, looking at the wrong things online, not going out, connecting, building relationships. Yeah. And so co-working to me is maybe the next best way to get people out of their homes. So we're partnering with co-working spaces to do what we're calling co-working days. So we're bringing the Launchpad community to come to the co-working spaces for the day. I do a walking tour in the morning. Come hang out. I walk with people in the morning. We go have coffee, and then we sit and then work there. And then we have a lunch and learn. We'll bring in a speaker to talk about a topic, and then we'll have a happy hour at 4:00. And so we really want to bring people to co-working, sponsored by Launchpad and some of our founding partners. So we just want to lift up our partners and say, let's bring more people to you.
Yeah. Now, does it cost to become a member of Launchpad? Like to be a member?
No.
Okay.
No.
Open to the community.
Open to the community, free to join.
Startup.
At some point, we may launch a paid membership that gives you more access to parts of the network. But right now, we're still building.
I think you said there might be a fourth. There's Springboard, and then there was
Springboard, Innovator Connect, co-working days, and we do our annual innovation summit in December, where we give away most innovative company of the year. So Carbon Quest and Treasury 401 in December. We do have one thing. We're partnering with Washington Technology Industry Association, is one of the most well-connected statewide organizations. The CEO lives in Spokane. Her name is Kelly Fukai. And her and I are working on connecting Eastern Washington to the Seattle innovation ecosystem. A lot of business development opportunities. And so she's bringing an event over here from WTIA they do in Seattle called Tech at Night. So we're doing a summer program with them. We'll probably try and do annually. We're doing it at the steam plant on June 17th called Tech at Night. We're going to bring some speakers in, feature some local speakers, but we're partnering with all these different organizations. The idea is to rebrand our region as being innovative. We have a ton of really smart people. I think you almost have to be grittier when you're in this area, right? To break out.
Yeah, you're not as tapped in. So how, is it launched? When does it launch? Is it already back launched?
Yeah, it's been around for 2 years.
Yeah. Okay.
I wouldn't call it stealthy, but we've been doing things mostly through LinkedIn and social media, but we're redesigning our website. That goes live in about a week. So there'll be a relaunch. There'll be, through Journal of Business and a podcast. So we've been working with Spokcast and Brennan. I've had 3 interviews, I think. So much like you, we want to do a podcast and feature the local regional innovators. Sure. Again, not just tech, not just life science, but people doing really creative stuff and give them a platform. And that's the idea.
Oh, that's really cool.
Define life science for me.
So anything medical, anything healthcare.
That's good.
I don't know.
That's a good question.
Anything medical, healthcare wise.
Healthcare, it's typically healthcare. I mean, but there's also plants.
Yeah, bioscience fit and all that.
Bioscience,
so life science is the top, and then everything branches.
Yeah, it's a pretty broad topic. There's also ag tech, stuff like that. So in our region, I mean, we're very strong energy, life science. We have believe it or not, a lot of cybersecurity and AI folks here. Yeah. Talent. It kind of all starts with talent in that people that create stuff, right? Entrepreneurs, researchers, people that are building products.
So what would be the best way to tap into Launchpad?
Launchpad INW.com is our website.
Gotcha.
And we have people fill out a quick form. And what we're trying to do is customize how we can help you. Give us a little information and we'll tell you what's coming up. And also our partner organizations and co-working. Like, where can people go to connect with some of this stuff?
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to double us back just because I'm still thinking through it. your ego part, the kind of Launch Northwest part. I mean, I feel like that's been my story the last 2 years, is like you wanted to put good things out there. You're doing it for the people. And then all of a sudden it just goes sideways.
Yeah.
The market changes, rates change, something changes in that. And so do you think it was just ego, or do you think there are things you could have had in place that would have helped you on that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think if I would have had an advisory board
Yeah.
of people who were, not just my friends that wanted to go to the events for free and just have fun, a part of the network, because we had a lot of fun. But I think if I would have had people like my attorney and my accountant were good friends, but they also were looking out for me, and they had those honest conversations with me. And I think as long as your advisors are like that and you listen to them, again, being coachable, I think we probably could have pivoted, to something a little more, sustainable.
Yeah.
But I want to believe I was coachable, or would have been under those circumstances. Maybe not.
Yeah.
And I also think maybe this is something I had to learn the hard way. I was a little hard-headed. But, who knows? I mean, maybe the right circumstances, we could have stuck it out.
Yeah, because I mean, that's kind of what we ended up doing, is going back through those businesses. And really one of our big moves to EXP was identifying that wasn't a cash center for us.
Right.
It was actually a lot of just bringing good people together and really looking at, but then we lacked the ability for a while to make that hard choice. And then when it was a hard choice, I was convincing enough to convince everybody around me that, no, this is what we should do.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those pieces, and you keep using the word coachable. And I always thought I was the most coachable. And now I'm reflecting on it, thinking, I don't think I was coachable at all. Like, I think everyone, you could have told me, don't do it. And in my head, I'm like, no, we're going to do this and try it. And do you think that journey for you, though, has kind of crafted you and the way you are now? Do you think you could have learned it without going through that? Do you think the person, like, I don't think I would have heard it. Like, I think even now today, going through it, I'm like, you could have told me slow, and I'm like, yeah, that's for you guys. Like, you go slow. And it keeps coming full circle too, because I remember there was one headline that did it. It wasn't even on purpose for some reason. Journal. Thanks, Lynn, but it said Tampien buys another downtown building. And I literally remember this saying. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. And you're like, you don't want to go to it, because it wasn't about the building. I believe that one was to help Lumen High School get chartered down there. I'm like, no, we're doing it for the good parts. And what I'm realizing as I'm looking back is, I think it was good in nature, but I don't think I was doing it for that. I think it was about me and about how to do it.
Honestly, I think I took my eye off the ball.
Yeah.
When I saw what it was doing to my wife and potentially my kids, if I kept down that path and didn't find a sustainable model, a business model that actually where we made money, or at least enough money to live, that was a pretty big eye opener for me. And again, she's amazing and just stuck in there with me. But I don't know. I think I probably needed to learn the lesson. I was pretty high on myself because I was in the paper, and you know how that goes.
That's how I know about you. I read about you in the paper.
Yeah, I mean, and I think I probably needed it. I needed to wake up.
Yeah.
Well, it's tough when you start to kind of believe your own highlight reel.
There
You
go.
know,
Made
it's
that.
like you come on a podcast, we're like, hey, this is Bill. He's done this. And there's a point in your life when, especially if you're having success.
I didn't like Bill back then either.
Right.
Trust me.
But you don't show those cards. And so people from the outside in, I think a lot of times there's some real truth to, like, man, there's a lot of darkness and down days between these highlight reels that don't get talked about a whole lot between people who look successful or appear. And not that you weren't. You were successful on a lot of rights. Like, but I think there's the way I think about it is like that, like being successful, and sometimes our behavior is not like in a certain capacity is what people are seeing or liking, and it's not what's making us successful. So like it can be like in real estate, right? It can very well be the market making you successful.
Right.
But you tell yourself the story. It's like, no, look how it's amazing. It's my charisma that's making me successful.
That's
People
right.
love me. It's like, well, no, dummy, it's the market. You don't learn that lesson till, till it's too late or until the market shifts. And then you're like, man, it wasn't just
the .com bubble did that to a lot of people I know, including me.
Teaches you a life lesson.
Yeah,
like,
we were making a ton of money back then, and then it just all crashed. So it was that part was humbling, but I got out just in time. But I had a lot of friends lose everything twice in 2008 and 2001. So yeah, I think you're both right. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of self-reflection. It's okay to do it now. For some reason, COVID, the whole pandemic accelerated a lot for a lot of people, good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, I did a lot of self-reflection, and getting older, you just start to reflect more on what's valuable. So I don't know if you've heard about it, but Harvard did a study for 80 something years, the longest known study of a cohort of people that they started. I think it was in the 30s, but they followed different people and their generations for years, and they still do it, surveying them, asking them what success was at the end of their life. And over 80% said it wasn't money, it wasn't fame, it wasn't power, it was true relationships. And I think we take that for granted. And so for me, I've always wanted to help build a community and help people connect. I'm a connector. I get a lot of joy out of meeting young salespeople in my industry in tech and connecting them to the right people that will help them with their career, or customers, or people in other industries. And I truly love doing it. And Alan's a great connector. But I still hang out with high school buddies that we went to state in football, one state in 81.
Catching a lot of Uncle Rico vibes.
Yeah,
man.
man. Still feel like you have it in you.
Football.
Still feel like you have the top.
Football was I got my identity in high school from starting as a junior, 5'8", 150 pounds. I'd never started in football. And it was only because the cornerback wanted to mentor me. I was nobody. I played baseball. I was good at baseball. I did fine, but not football. And I loved it. But I had a mentor who he owns Perfection Tire out in the Valley. And Keith is his name. And he just looked at me one day and said, "You really want to play? Because I need a good safety behind me." Because the last guy was a star. And he goes, "I'm going to help you, but you're not going to like it." And I became an athlete because I worked hard and I was dedicated, and it was hard. But that's why I love football so much, because it taught me a life lesson about hard work.
That's why I love sports.
Yeah.
For that reason.
Yeah. And so I reflect on that a lot when I doubt myself. Just hard work, man. But sometimes you're going after the wrong thing, and that's where the advisory board comes in, and the people that are willing to tell you the truth.
Yeah, and I think that's the key when you're building your advisory board. Find the people that will tell you the truth.
Right.
Not what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. And I think that was a big difference on mine, was surrounding myself with people that at the time I just probably had the better idea. And so people just agree, and then
you're
I
a
would
good
go
sales
take
guy.
it out, and I'm decent at sales. So
Being a good salesperson gets us into a lot of trouble.
Well, you can convince yourself of a lot of your own bullshit.
Exactly, right? I probably sell myself the best of any of them.
Bullshit
but then it's funny, like going through, and now to your point, and I can't tell if it's age or I've listened now to people how to do it, but like me and Whitney are having conversations we never had for a decade because I never had to. We were winning. We were doing things. Logan's seeing things. That's I'm wondering
you see the negative that comes with it.
But if somebody would explain that negative to me, could I understand it the same way I understand it now?
Think about yourself as a teenager.
Yeah.
How hard is it to convince teenagers to do things?
Hard, man.
It's so hard.
So entrepreneurs are a lot like teenagers that way. I was the same way.
Yeah.
I was so convinced we were going to be on a rocket ship.
Yeah.
And I've had two other startups
too, but you have to be a little bit, though, right? Because you're taking on a crazy
But there's a fine line.
Yeah.
And I think you brought this up.
Yeah,
there's a fine line of, I got to stick to this. And you hear these stories of
grit, determination,
and they power through it, even the darkest of times, and now they're a success. To maybe this is a really bad idea.
Yeah.
So I can't explain it, but it happens, and it's usually the best thing to do is put people that are impartial around you, that are interested in your success, but they maybe they don't have a vested interest. So you can get that kind of third party,
and then listen to that feedback. Like on one, because I talked to 4 people, and they're like, never do Brick West. I'm like, but I want to. I really like it. And I see something they know, or like there's 3 or 4 of them like that, and I'm like, God, how do you? So I think every time all my questions are designed, how do I help Logan, my daughter, figure this out better than I did? Because she has that same stubbornness, grittiness to her. And I'm like, how could I convey the same message? Because even she sees what we're going. She doesn't know. She still goes to school. She doesn't, right? A lot of mine is just dealing with, like, for a long time it worked, and then I was terrible at confrontation. I avoided, and all of a sudden this last year, I'm like, well, you can't. It's in your face. You can't avoid it. And now I'm getting better at it. It's not
problems.
Exactly. And so, like, I look at some of mine, I'm like, if I would have just been up front with everybody day one, not tried to fix it for 2 years, I'm like, I wonder what it'd be. But it's really, for me, trying to figure out how do you synthesize the feeling I had to feel going through this into a way somebody can digest and have.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's the,
Well, and could you, right? Like I think
Could
of,
you? Yeah, sorry,
I catch myself saying a lot of times, like now I'm like middle aged now. So I'm like, it's like explaining to a 30-year-old what you're going to feel like when you're 40,
Yeah.
like physically, you know,
Yeah.
and you're like, but when you're 30, you're like, yeah, whatever. I take good care of myself. You know, now I'm like, sometimes rolling over
Yeah.
it hurts, but you never understand that till it happens. Then you're like, oh, this is what they have all been talking about. I get it now. Not in a bad way. I get it now.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a part of the life that you don't get it till you get it.
Yeah.
And people can tell you till they're blue in the face. But one thing I've tried to get better at is like giving piece of advice is like to a Keith, or if it was like identifying what I would now consider outlier situations
Mhm.
and not using them as the premise for my
Right.
situation.
Right.
So it's so easy to see, you know, whatever, not Michael Jordan's not a great example, but you see that star basketball player who has this high level of talent, never practices,
Mhm.
always thinks the three, and you're like, oh, they can do it. Now I can do it. You're like, no, Johnny's an outlier.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's a 1 in a
Yeah.
trillion.
Yeah.
So he's not a good model to go after. And so I think a lot of times when you look at these kind of stories that Hollywood grabs onto or that we kind of fantasize about, it's like a lot of them are outlier situations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like the guy who never gave up that and ended up working out and making $1 million is like, that wouldn't have worked 1,000 out of 1,001 times.
Yeah.
He was in the right place, right time, so it worked, but we're going to hang on to that to be like, so now I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And it's just a terrible model, right?
Yeah.
You should be looking for the more consistent, steady Eddie, works every
Yeah.
time, the hard work, the practice, to show up. Like those are much more sustainable models to chase than outliers. But outliers can be sexy.
But we didn't have social media growing up
Yeah.
either. At least I
Right.
didn't. I don't know if you guys did when you were younger, but I definitely didn't. And social media now, if you look at what these kids are looking at, it's exactly what
looking
you're
at
talking
outlier
about. They're looking at
situations.
influencers. They're looking at stars that are, have millions of fans and making a ton of money. YouTube influencers, which is not a bad thing, which I applaud if you can do it.
But even
But
those are
getting
outliers.
there,
Yeah,
they're outliers.
To
They're
grab
not
the,
the norm.
average, 5th grader and say, we're gonna do whatever we can to make you an influencer.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right, would be no different than grabbing the average 5th grader and saying we're gonna do
NBA
nothing less than make you Michael Phelps. It's
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
the odds of that are just so, but we tend not to think of it that way because those are what are in our feed.
It's what we
Yeah.
see.
We see a
Yeah.
million outliers
Yeah.
every day, so we
Yeah.
think it's the norm.
Yeah.
Right? It's that
Yeah.
association bias, I think, is
Yeah.
what they call that. or
Well, and
whatever.
and you just don't know. But
Yeah.
like some things I'm finding really helpful for me is that because I'm convincing in a lot of ways to myself, is that like I just need to build these boxes. And so I think of like for my daughter, I'm like, do I just build these boxes that says, hey, if you're gonna buy a building, it has to hit these 10 things.
Mm-hmm.
Like things that people like you could actually make it a little more black and white than what I would call some of mine were emotional decisions. And
So I got a question for you guys then. So with your advisory boards, or like you mentioned, there's some people that, that are really good friends. How do you structure it so you transcend the relationship between friend and advice? Like, okay, you're advising me in this moment, you're my friend in 5 minutes from now, or you know what I mean? Because I feel like I have a lot of people that help advise me or that I can bounce ideas off of or give me sound advice, but it's casual. But then there's also times where it's like, are you being a friend or are you being an advisor? Right?
Yeah.
Do you have that conversation with them? Do you set up
Yeah.
a specific time? Like
so
day or
monthly,
week or month?
yeah. So it's monthly, and then and typically you just can't take things personally. I think that's just a rule I live by
Right.
now, because if you take it personally, then nobody is free to say whatever. And so a lot of times it's before I buy anything now of size, and then helping me because I need these boxes.
Mhm.
It's like one of my new boxes, if it depreciates in value, you got to pay cash. Well, that would have solved like 15 other problems. I would have had I'm just tracing these back to root causes.
Yeah.
And so then I'll run like those kind of premises by, or, hey, now I do want to scale the business side. I see a really big
But
opportunity.
when you approach them with these ideas, do you say verbally? You say, "Hey, this is an advisory moment. This is what I'm thinking."
No.
Okay.
No, you
They
just trust that in it. And then you just know all you're asking for is don't hold anything back. If don't say it because I'm passionate, because I get super passionate. I love this stuff. And then I'm saying, so just say it. And then a lot of times I'll be like, that's a bad idea. And
I
it's
feel like I'm having a hankering right now just to be on people's advisory board.
but you,
Like, that is the dumbest thing ever.
Yeah.
Holy-
so then the context to it is you never say it's the dumbest. It's,
No,
hey,
I'm kidding.
this
Yes.
idea, tell me why you think this works.
Yeah.
And then find somebody that just has life experience, right? And so that's been the most help on mine.
I think just from my perspective, this is why you got to pick wisely.
Mhm.
You got to find friends that aren't, because I have friends that we just joke around all the time. I would never put them on my advisory board,
Right.
even though they're super, talented and successful. But there are people, you have that kind of friendship. That's a person you want to go have a drink with or just hang out with. But then there are friends that are good friends, but they also have a serious side to them because they're really good at what they do and they're very successful. And I have those people on my board. And I have those people that are advisors.
Do you tell them though that this is like an advisory board for this thing?
Of course, that's it. I don't even approach them unless they have that personality trait.
Gotcha.
Meaning, I don't even approach the people that we just joke around all the time because I already know that we're most likely going to struggle. They're going to tell me what I want to hear most likely, and I don't want that. So I do have enough friends that are the kind that, and my advisory board, I only have 5 people. It's not that easy to find someone who's going to be honest, but also have your back and give you, actual advice that's going to help you versus what you want to hear. So I'm pretty careful about that.
And then do they know each other and do you guys all meet collectively or is it more one-on-one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right now we're kind of meeting quarterly, but I'm adding 4 more people. So we'll have 9. And it's going to grow the board. I actually want someone's going off the board, but that's my formal board. So as a 501c3, I have to have a board.
Gotcha.
Right? But I also have personal friends, my consigliaries, right?
Yep.
That are people that I go to with insider baseball stuff that is really important. I have a handful of those that are really smart. We do that for each other. I have 2 or 3 people like that.
So that's more of mine. Is like Joel's not on it.
Yeah.
Right. My best friend, brother, business partner, he's not one of those.
Right.
Right. And then the other key was I had to find people that were way more successful.
Absolutely.
Like they've achieved at a level, like just because you're nice and tell me the truth, that's not enough. Like,
that's a lot easier for me.
Because they might not be able to advise you.
No, that's
right?
what I'm saying.
Like,
So you have to move it up.
But you need to be able to ask them questions.
Exactly. And so it's just kind of, it stumbled into it. And then what I found was I accept that advice way easier.
Yeah.
Because then, and then the better ones so far have been awesome because I'll pitch one like let's say it's scale my property management company.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to be like, well, we don't really think property management has a future in the next 10 years, right? They're gonna be like, well, why?
Mm-hmm.
What do you benefit if you scale it? Why do you? And so then it's a lot more of probing questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ultimately answer it,
mm-hmm.
right? But they're so good at probing into it.
Right.
But then we grab a drink after. But I think as long as you have to find somebody that just tells you that's a terrible idea.
Mm-hmm.
Or, hey, Jordan, you're in the wrong there. This is not how you do it.
Do you think you're in a better position now to listen?
Oh, geez. And that's what I guess that's what my question was trying to get at was I am in the best position.
Yeah.
Like I listen better. I'm probably the most coachable I've ever been in my life.
Yeah.
But I can't I can't tell if it was because I also didn't like what I just went through. And so I don't know if that's the answer.
Right.
But I listened to him and then again, I think I had a ton of friends around me and I'd be like, hey, well, you're tough. You're not a good example. Let's assume you didn't do real estate, right? Hey, I'm thinking about buying this house.
Mm-hmm.
You're sitting over there on your 9-to-5 job and wondering, wait, how is he buying another one?
Yeah.
Of course, go, man. Let's get another one. And you're like, some of the breaks, Joel was that to me before, like in the business, but we were so tied in everything we were doing where I would just convince him and then really
I would come to you guys. So I actually own some real estate. I think you and I talked about that. Yeah. And we haven't started the development process, but I'm pretty early and we have 70 acres that we're looking at developing up at Deer Lake.
Yep.
And I'm out of my realm.
Right.
So I have more time now to spend on going through the process, hiring a GC, going and trying to figure out because like you said, do you pay cash or do you finance it? Yeah. So we're going through some of that.
Yeah.
And so I would come to you two and say, in a heartbeat, and say, here's the parameters I'm looking at. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
And I would say, I would listen to you both because you're both successful. And we don't hang out every day. I'm not, vulnerable around you enough for you to go, dude, you need to walk, or what are you doing? Yeah, you're out of your league here. Yeah. But I think you guys would say, if you're going to do this, these are the things I'd think about.
Yeah. And what I would say, so that's a perfect example, right? So when I built mine, the question wouldn't be whether I should do it from does this project make sense?
Right.
It's Jordan, based on what you've told me where you want to be, do you need to do this project?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's less like that's a perfect example. It's less about the actual project I'm doing. It's does this add value?
Right.
You've told me now the last 10 times you want to be here, and now you want to literally bought a resort on Loon Lake.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
they're like,
I remember.
Now I'm like,
did that
was
really
nowhere
help me?
close? There was nowhere close. Like if I had that group before, they would have been like,
Prime of
they would have been like, you
opportunity, not
idiot.
necessarily,
That's the best type of advice to get.
Yeah.
Is what's your goal? I love it when friends or advisors say, tell me what your goal is first, because then I can help you.
Yeah.
But if I don't know what your long-term goal is, then I'm going to struggle.
Yeah.
Because you can buy all the stuff you want.
Well, and that was the hard part, because I remember looking back, I think I had in my notes, all I ever really wanted was that my credit card always swiped and I never looked at the right side of a menu.
Yeah.
I'm like a pretty simple being.
It's the right side of the menu.
It's where all the prices are.
That's right.
Oh,
right. If I wanted food, I wanted to be able to
like,
get food.
Is that
But
the
like
appetizer section, or
yeah,
is that like the?
I mean,
well,
right side of each
I
thing.
got you. Yes.
But then when I look at it, I'm like, but that has no guidance. There's no true north to that. There's no stopping.
What's
in
funny
that.
is the really people that have FU money and are super successful, they do look at the pricing.
Yeah.
They're very good at that,
Some
right?
of them,
They a lot of them make a point of that.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, I love those kind of people.
Yeah.
That are wearing jeans right next to you, and we wouldn't know they had, a pot to piss in.
Yeah.
And those are the people I love talking to.
And I think those are going to be the hardest to find now in this social media world, because they
they're
want
also
to stay under the radar.
To find in general, because they're incognito by nature.
Yeah, they want to be.
They want to be incognito. They don't run around saying I have $20 million.
Well, at least I'm at the age now where I know a lot of those people from the DSP, from just being around Spokane forever and just getting to know people, right? Yeah. There's a handful of them, and a lot of them will be your mentor.
Oh,
as long as they don't think you want something from them. I want to get to know you and whatever I can add value for some of your projects.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I love what you did with Launchpad. All of that summed up to be said is like, I should have got a mentor way sooner. Like, I should have had
it's funny because I'm sitting here thinking
sooner.
to myself, like, when I get into a bind in a lot of places, the first thing I think of is like, well, I need to call my attorney, or I need to call a CPA. Maybe you should just call somebody you don't have to pay and say, here's the situation.
Well,
what would
then they'll
you
be
do?
like, then they'll
But
correct
if they
you.
say call an attorney, then you call an attorney.
Yeah.
My go-to is like, I think of business professional industry related, instead of being like, oh, there's probably 15 people who've been through something very similar.
That's
that
it.
Could provide
That's
value.
it. 100%. There's just no, because when we see the young people, like, man, I want to help you, or you give somebody advice and they're not listening.
Yeah.
Like, man, we've been through it. I'm 61 years old. I've been through a lot.
Yeah.
It's
and
crazy.
it kind of there's some beauty in what you're talking about and saying, like, you now recognize you need it and now you're seeking it out, as opposed to this unsolicited, come here, kid, I can tell you're green. I'm going to give you some life lessons.
Right.
It lands different, right?
Yeah.
It lands different. It may not would have, maybe wouldn't have landed with you years ago because you weren't seeking. Now I'm actively seeking those relationships.
Yeah.
Like, I know I need them. I know I value them. I know I want them.
Well, and I almost, when I started, I realized I needed that stubbornness. I needed the fact that you both told me no, and I'm going to go do it to prove you wrong. Like, that's how some great things did happen. I just am always trying to think through that again for my daughter. Of like, could there have been a framework around that where I didn't have to do that, yet still have the grit to survive? Like you said, I think it's one of the best parts. You're like, no, I signed. I'm gonna write the check.
Yeah.
It's my fault. Like, I'm not in this because somebody put me here.
Right.
Yeah, the market could have been better, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't. So finish it, fix it, try to do it the best way you can. But it's that piece of like, can you avoid that curve? But then I also think, like, if you're a shoe dog, like Phil Knight's story, he almost went bankrupt like 4 times.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, back to your offline.
Yeah.
He also introduced clothing and shoes in a time that was perfect for it, right? It's like so many parts to it that make a ton of sense.
And real estate's a little tougher too. People don't realize how complicated real estate is. I'm not in real estate as a profession. We're just starting to tinker with it. But what you both do, and especially on the commercial side, I've seen it, man. It's brutal.
Well,
it's up and down. It's the real estate market that can be really complex.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, I want to get Rob in here, chat with him a little bit about it. I mean, his story through it, right? It's
he's great to talk to.
Yeah, and and it's really charismatic, but he understands it. But I think that's kind of the part. But I also know that's the risk. I think the only thing I didn't realize is that I signed up for that risk.
That's right.
My life didn't really. She's kind of
and it's also one of those things where, as I've pulled back more layers of the onion, it gets more complicated than the surface
Massively
level. Like there's a
complicated,
drastic difference between going to buy a rental house and throw out a tenant in there. And yes, there's some nuance there, and some it gets way more nuanced when you start developing land. You start dealing with like the government. You start dealing with multifamily projects, new construction. I mean, yeah, then there's been times where like I've been doing this almost 20 years, and there's times where I go into a meeting and then I leave and I'm like, what were they talking about? Like, what am I thinking? Right? Like,
Well, think
and
of your site out back here. That's going to be an intense development, right?
Yeah.
You're dealing with
and it's like, well,
soils,
if I'm
rock.
thinking about it, and I've been doing this for 20 years, I'm like, I can imagine somebody just randomly buying a chunk of land and doing it, right? Like,
Well, that's
unless you had good advisors, right? Unless you had
Well,
a
I got
group
it so
of people
cheap.
who had the experience.
I got it so cheap. I'm like, we could just hold on to it, you know. But yeah, it's.
Oh, and I wasn't talking about your situation necessarily. I'm talking about this
the
piece
advisor,
back here.
Oh
that's-
yeah.
chunk
But
back
it's
here.
one of
that I bought some other land previously and I had to back out because there was some soil problems.
Yeah.
So I totally get it.
Yeah, and it's just one of those hard ones. But then you go through and you're like, I understand. Now I can look at your site and I'm like, all right, you're probably gonna use micro piles. You're gonna have setbacks over there. The sun hits this building at such an angle, you probably want to stack most of your elevators on this side.
Wow.
You're gonna want a bottom entrance this way because you have better turn and circulation with first level part. And I'm like, oh my God, you only know. I could have read books. You could probably ask chat to tell you the best way. But until you go through that thing, it's like.
And AI can only do so much for you, right? Maybe let's say it'll do 85% of what you need. That other 15% are critical. And if you can find some of these advisors, these mentors, and you don't even have to call them mentors. I mean, that's kind of a weird term anyway. It's like networking, mentoring and networking.
Yeah.
It's more or less building relationships.
Yeah.
And I've always approached building relationships as being a giver first.
Yeah.
Whenever I've gone in to meet with someone, it's always, I want to know more about what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And there's got to be someone I can introduce you to that helps you. There's got to be something I can offer you. Before I ask you for anything, I'm always going to offer you something and be genuine about it. And that's how I've gotten to know so many people in different industries. It's just because I have a pretty good network, mostly because I'm old. And then secondly, just because I've been doing the networking thing for so long.
Now I have to think about what I can offer people.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's critical.
So if
I
we
will
were,
tell you what the best micro beer in Spokane is on any given week.
There you go. You probably have more than you think. You probably have more than
I
you
would
think.
hope so.
Yeah.
the micro beer is a good lead.
Well, a lot of young people aren't drinking beer anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
Or drinking, period.
Yeah.
They're just doing straight drugs.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a pendulum. It's a pendulum. Yeah. It's a pendulum. Yeah. So if somebody's starting their business or in their business, I am becoming a huge advocate of whether it's your own advisory board or a mentor.
Yeah.
I was probably at that point too scared to ask because I didn't know what to ask.
Yeah.
How would you recommend they approach you?
Don't know.
Yeah. How would you recommend they either approach a group like you that could help connect them or help them form that first advisory committees or single mentor, right?
Yeah.
How
would
would
you
you
know anybody
recommend
right now that you can think of that you've met maybe and you've chatted with a few times? Just start thinking about some of those people you admire that maybe have a little more experience. And I was joking earlier, you didn't hear me, but it's much easier for me to find people that are more successful than me than it probably is for you guys. But
there's a lot.
But it's hard, right?
Yeah.
So I sat down and there were people that I really admire that are friends with me, but they're not best friends, right?
Yeah.
So they're people that are successful. And I bet you if you sat down, it doesn't take many. You could even just start with one. And what happens is you start to meet their colleagues. And that's what's happened to me. Like I know quite a few retired people that love to sit and have coffee. I have coffee with some names of people you all know that are retired, that I have the best conversations and learn what they've done, why they were so successful. And when I bring up real estate, they're like, "Oh yeah, I developed all kinds of lake property." And I'm like, "Oh man, like you just did for 3 minutes, talked more about soil and where to put your building and your elevator and stuff." That's what they do, is they can just sit down and tell you a life experience. It saves you a lot of pain and a lot of
So then
struggle.
the script to somebody trying to find that person because that person doesn't want to be, basically that to script to find that person is that you go up, offer something of value for that, right?
It's got to be natural. And a lot of times, believe it or not, a lot of these folks that are retired want to be active.
Yeah.
So I got, when we were in the Journal of Business about bringing Launchpad back, I had probably half a dozen retired folks that I knew from back in the day that knew Launchpad. They contacted me and said, "I'm retired. I'd love to get involved and be an advisor," because they knew what we were doing. I still get that today. They'll come to my events and say, "Man, let's go get coffee. I want to help." And so I guarantee you probably know some people. I wouldn't even ask them to be an advisor the first meeting. I would say, use your sales skills a little bit and just be curious and say, "What are you doing now? Tell me a little bit about what you're doing and kind of what your journey was. I'd love to learn a little bit more." about, how you got here, and let them talk and just listen and kind of pick up on cues of, man, this could be someone that, and just ask them, hey, if I ever had a question, would you be okay with me reaching out?
That's a good one. Yeah.
9 times out of 10, they say, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee you both, people that are my age and a little bit older are looking at you guys going, man, I wish I had your energy. Or man, I wish, I remember what it was like to be, I wish I had someone that I could have helped or that could have helped me.
Yeah.
And so you're probably going to find a few people that are going to be like, yeah, man, I'll talk to you. And then every once in a while, once you start to build up that equity of a relationship, when they know you're not out just to get something from them, or, you don't want them to write a check the first time you meet them. And that's what I used to get when I first started Launchpad. I was like, are you looking for sponsors? I'm like, nope. I just want to see if you'd be interested in talking to a couple entrepreneurs that were in your industry, life science or tech or whatever. Yeah. But start to get a feeling of, I think this is somebody that I trust, and they can trust me. Go to them for advice once in a while.
Yeah. And then also, I think what I found was you got to find somebody that's either kids are older, they're kind of in a life cycle past that grind, because I'll get ones to go grab coffee. And the whole reason I started being an entrepreneur, I was like, I'll grab coffee with everyone. Yeah. Because nobody grabbed coffee with me. Dude. And then now I get the request. I'm like, I am so sorry. So I'm out to like 26 before I actually like this. Is why when you're targeting somebody,
that's
find
right.
somebody who's like on that.
Yeah. This is why I started the walking group.
Oh, yeah.
I said, yeah, man, I'm going to be at such and such co-working 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock. Come join us. We'll go for a walk. And then they're like, I don't need to walk. Right. Well, some people took me up on it. Yeah. I love to walk. Yeah. I love to walk. And
downtown's the best place for it.
I love it. Walk. Yeah. River Park, all Riverfront Park. But there are definitely ways to build these relationships without, and you guys know, if someone comes to you and says, hey man, I'd love to take you to lunch, or I'd love to go have a beer or whatever. And you're like, uh-oh.
What do you need?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like,
what do you need?
Or what marketing thing are you trying to get me involved in?
Right.
And no negative about people that do that, but I think there's a way you can use your instincts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just more curious of the structure, if it's slated that way, which it sounds a little bit like it is.
But you've had a coach though.
Yeah, I paid a lot of money. It's very different.
So,
I know what's going on there because I just dropped.
They're responding.
Yeah. They're not.
But I think you make it a win-win. So on ours, on mine, and again, they all started with just people that started talking to me straight, about this stuff. Yeah. That's how all mine started. And then I was like, hey, do you mind if we grab a beer here? And then now, and so it just was one of those that naturally grew. And I was like, I just keep kicking myself because there's been like 5 decisions that they kind of worked through with. And I'm like, if I would have had that advice, this thing would have been so different. And so it's,
I guarantee you're going to be that for someone else someday.
Oh, now I will because of this,
right?
I'm hoping to do what they did for me.
That's the greatest gift. And you learn more as a human in helping other people. 100%. Yeah. It's more rewarding in some ways than having a successful deal. I love closing business. That's my high. For a year and a half when I was locked up, had greenfield accounts, couldn't sell anything, Google Cloud. We were a distant third. I started selling stuff on Facebook Marketplace.
Like just hustling?
Yeah. We had stuff. I was like, I wanted that feeling of selling something.
I want to close.
I'm a closer.
The deal junkie.
Exactly. I love closing.
Bill should have got in by Wander.
Exactly. Jordan, I know. He's growing that things in Seattle now.
I always say that. I'm a deal junkie. I always like people, that's
good.
why I have to stay off those things, right? Like I can't be on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist because it's like, hey Keith, do you want an 86 Oldsmobile? No, wait, what?
Yeah.
No, it's super interesting.
Well, Bill, thank you so much, man. This has been a blast. Love to have you back again sometime if you're open to it.
Absolutely.
And name of the podcast again?
It's just Launchpad Podcast with Bill Kalivas.
Super creative, obviously.
Yeah. So. Till we come up with a better name and a better host.
You got time.
And launchpadinw.com.
Yeah, that's
right?
it.
That's all right, man. Well, hey, look forward to getting more involved in Launchpad, honestly.
Definitely.
I'm excited.
That'd be super cool.
Yeah, it's all about innovation. Really, it can be the whole spectrum. Yeah. Love having people that just have new ideas.
Yeah. Super cool. Well, thank you again.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, you guys, thanks for listening to today's episode. While you're out there, would you please do us a favor and give us a like, subscribe, or a follow, whether you listen on Spotify, iTunes, or YouTube. We'd really appreciate it. Also, if you don't mind while you're there, give us a 5-star review. Maybe write a review. If you have a favorite episode, feel free to give it a like. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate it.